We do not support what's called co-governance.
We believe in democracy for public assets.
I wish we had one system that could treat everyone the same, but we never have. Racism doesn't just happen to Māori.
We should be making sure that every dollar we spend is being spent well.
I think the National Party has the answers to take New Zealand forward.
Our vision is a modern New Zealand.
We are making changes to the law in that area.
欢迎收看 Channel 33特备节目2023新西兰大选党魁访谈，我是 Andrew Andelo。访谈的目的并不是要和嘉宾来进行辩论，或者是驳斥他们的政见，而是希望通过他们的回答，让您来自行判断他是否是一名合格的从政者，新西兰的未来能不能够交给他。那么今天呢的嘉宾是国家党的党魁 Christopher Luxon。Please have some Chinese tea, Chris. Welcome to my program.
Great to be with you.
Yeah, just let you know the purpose of this interview is not so much about individual policies.
Yes.
All right. It is about the future of this country, and I would really like to know if it is under national-led government, where are you going to take this country to? All right, in terms of, let's say, for example, education, health, family well-being, international relationship, and so on. At the moment, we understand we have pretty much two sets of systems running side by side in this country. Some people believe this country is divisive because of the current systems. So my question is, what would you do? Do you actually believe the country is divisive, number one? And number two, what changes can we expect the future of your government will make for this country?
Look, I think this government has played what I call identity politics. It's actually pitched groups of New Zealanders against other groups of New Zealanders. And so it's been farmers versus city folk, it's been landlords versus tenants, and I think it's even been Māori versus non-Māori. And we have a very simple view, which is that actually we are one country. We should be incredibly proud of all the individual identities and the communities that we come from. New Zealand is a much richer and a much better place because of the diversity that we have in it. But the thing that unites us all is that we're all New Zealanders first and foremost. And so therefore we believe that we have one country, we have one system of public services, we make those available to all New Zealanders on the basis of their needs, not their ethnicity, and as a result we all have equal citizenship, one person, one vote under the law. So for us that's why we say we do not support what's called co-governance of public services, because we just think we come through the lens of needs, not ethnicity.
So how are you going to balance that up with they called Treaty of Waitangi?
Well, the Treaty of Waitangi is a founding document for New Zealand, but it actually brings us together as one country. You know, if you go through the three different articles, it actually, I think, is actually a very good guide. I appreciate there's lots of different interpretations of those articles,
of course,
but actually, you know, it brings us together as one country. It says that Māori should be working, you know, to make sure they have input over management of local resources and taonga and treasure, and then likewise we're all equal citizenship. That gives us a good structure and a good guideline to say that can unify us rather than divide us.
So are you going to abolish the current system that we're having?
For example, we don't see a need for a Māori Health Authority and Health New Zealand. We will scrap the Māori Health Authority because we think there is one healthcare system, and that actually people's decision on whether they get access to healthcare should be based off their needs, not their ethnicity.
But we also understand any movements or changes that makes a particular group of people feeling disadvantaged or unhappy, we are likely to see waves of protests, all right? And certainly it will create some degree of social unrest, like what we have seen before during the pandemic. My question is, does your party have the experience and ways to deal with this kind of social unrest?
Oh, look, I think, you know, if you look at previous national governments, you know, we've actually we've had high levels of social cohesion through those periods of government. And so that's what I want to see happen here in New Zealand. We don't have to become like other countries we've seen where we become very polarised. We actually can't have a civil conversation even if we have differences of opinion. It doesn't have to be personal if we're actually going to have differences of opinion. And so I think we want to work quite hard at making sure we have civility, that we actually listen and we have robust discussion about ideas that are different from each other. But that doesn't mean we have to be divisive, and it doesn't mean that we have to be polarised, as we've seen in other countries. That's the great thing about New Zealand. there are politicians on the other side that I don't agree with, but they come with good intentions, arguably. I disagree strongly with their ideas, but I don't have to demonise the individual as such.
What National is going to do, and if you have to deal with everyday protests and people walk to the parliaments and protest about the changes, let's say for example you want to scrap the Maori health.
All of that is quite hypothetical, and what I just say to you is, the right to protest is something we fully respect in New Zealand. I try and actually go out onto the Parliament forecourt and meet with many of the protesters that I encounter on a weekly basis in Parliament. That's the great thing about a liberal democracy, is that you actually get to stand up and protest peacefully for the issue that you're standing up for. Where it gets out of order is when it actually causes pain and suffering on other fellow New Zealanders. But, everyone is entitled to their right to protest, and we should respect that as long as it's done peacefully.
Okay. What we have told, there is a decent size of physical hole for the new finance minister to deal with. How are you going to assure the people of New Zealand that your future government will have enough revenue to run the country without any major cuts on public spending? Are you going to borrow more?
Well, the first thing I'd say is that national governments are famous for having really good economic management. That's what we do in government. We often have to come to government cleaning up an awful mess that's been left behind by former Labour governments. It's quite a normal pattern in our history, sadly. And so the answer here is, look, this is unique because we've had a government that I think has mismanaged the economy incredibly badly over the last 6 years. They have spent more, they have taxed more, and they have borrowed more, and yet we have nothing to show for it. We have nothing that we've seen in terms of improved outcomes for New Zealanders. So what we really have to start with is that first and foremost we have a spending problem in New Zealand, not a tax or a revenue problem. We have a spending problem. That's because the government has increased government spending by 80%. 80%. And you and I would sit there and go, well, I haven't seen an 80% improvement in healthcare. I haven't seen an 80% improvement in education. I haven't seen an 80% improvement in law and order. And the reality is we've got nothing to show for it. And it's unique because coming from my old world, you measure success by the results that you deliver, not by how much money you spend. So we have to get the mindset right. It's about outcomes and results, not just solely about the money that you're going to spend. Now, having said that, I've committed, and Nicola Willis and I have both committed, that in health and education, we're going to continue to increase the spending each and every year that we're in government. And that is because we think those are two critical areas where we need to keep our investments in good shape. But importantly, we need to get better results for that money that we're spending. So initially, we have to come through and make sure that every one of those $137 billion of government spending is actually not wasteful, not dumb, not stupid, but actually is money that's actually making a difference and actually helping New Zealand go faster. And we're going to go through line item by line item by line item because we have seen some horrendous wasteful spending taking place.
When we talk about wasteful spending and you want to prevent that, you want to cut the wasteful spending, so is there any particular departments that you can mention?
Well, essentially it's across the whole of government. What we've seen from this government is, you just think about it, $55 million wasted exploring a walking and cycling bridge across the Waitemata Harbour. $140 million spent on a light rail project that's going to cost New Zealand $30 billion that nobody wants. That's just wasteful spending. I think about the $500 million of expired rapid antigen tests that will get written off at the end of this year, early next year, because the government over-ordered. So there's a real challenge with respect to just the largesse that's happening within this government that we see and the wasteful money. And the point is, it's not the government's money. It's the taxpayers' money, because for that money to be collected, someone has to go to work this morning at 7 a.m. They get themselves to work, they pay their taxes, they work incredibly hard, they get their kids to school, they're doing everything right. They give that money to the government only for Chris Hipkins to go and waste it.
Do you actually support the 3 tunnels proposal?
Through the Auckland Harbour crossing.
Look,
right. We've been talking about that, and actually a tunnel solution was what...
Why do we need 3 tunnels?
John Key had a tunnel solution back when his government was in power too. So, look, we'll have a look at the options closely. I think a tunnel option makes sense. What we're interested in is making sure that actually that tunnel or that crossing actually is dealing with traffic, and it's actually taking cars through, so we've got more options. And then maybe we can use the bridge for more public transport.
Wouldn't you be interested to simply just landfill and close the gap between the CBD and North Shore?
Fill in the ocean.
Why not?
No.
It's only about
No.
1.5 kilometers long.
Yeah, no. My goodness.
Why not?
No, we're not doing that.
Right.
We're definitely not doing that. That harbour is a sparkling jewel and asset for New Zealand and an iconic harbour as well.
I'm just asking. Anyway, okay. Anyway, what
You
is...
sound like you might have come from Singapore. I mean, that's the sort of thing that Singaporeans do, reclaim land from the sea.
That's
So,
true. Yeah, I was actually educated in Singapore. You're right. What is your view on GST exemptions on fruit and veggies?
Look, it's an idea that people come up with from time to time.
Even Winston Peters is supporting it.
But the answer is it's complex to administer.
Okay.
It actually ends up benefiting rich people over poor people, and it's complex to work out exactly what it's applied to and what it's not applied to. And so it sounds good on the surface, but actually the reality is very difficult. And that's why you've seen Grant Robertson, the current finance minister, say that that's not something he's up for either.
But he has changed his mind.
No, he's changed his mind on the wealth tax, but
Okay.
but also on this, he's been very strong to say taking GST off food doesn't make sense.
Talking about wealth tax, will national future governments consider introduce wealth tax and capital gain tax?
No, never. No, I mean...
Is that a commitment?
Yes, that would be a wrecking ball through the economy.
Okay.
Essentially, wealth taxes haven't worked in other countries around the world, and it would just be a huge... we're in the middle of a recession, and the way is not to tax our way out of a recession.
But what about capital gain tax? Because capital gain tax is actually going on in many different countries.
Yeah, we won't be doing a capital gains tax either here in New Zealand. As I said to you, we have a spending problem, not a tax problem. And the reality is we need to fix our spending and make sure that we've got good, focused spending rather than increasing taxes on people.
Talking about tax, this is something I find is interesting because nobody actually mentioning is our secondary tax. At the moment, we are facing high interest rate, cost of living crisis. There must be thousands of families work more, earn more to pay for the mortgage or whatever, to put food on the tables. However, I find that our secondary tax rate is actually discouraging people to pick up extra work, or at the same time, it's actually encouraging cash job markets. Okay, so the government is actually missing out the tax revenue anyway. And also, secondary tax rate is actually preventing some very healthy, very experienced people receiving superannuation at the moment. They can actually still contribute to the society. They can still provide a very good experience and to be a trainer in our labor market. Why wouldn't we change the secondary tax rates and encourage people to still contribute to the country?
Yeah, look, I've heard the issue a few times, and it gets raised with me when I'm out and about across the country, which is around secondary tax and how it's a disincentive for people to take on extra hours or more work as a result. We'll, in fairness, we'll have more to say about that with respect to our tax plan.
You're not telling me much, are you? Okay. Now, law and order. Okay, there's no doubt law and order is one of the hottest topic or one of the very main concerns, especially within our Chinese community. National Party has come up with a number of policies, I understand, aiming at gangs, youth offenders, retail crimes, and so on. But my question is, why are we spending $150,000 or more on each prison a year, when most of the household families were not earning that much money, but we are fitting $150,000 for each inmate a year? Are you preparing to change that?
The actual cost per prisoner is the total cost of all of our corrections
But do
system
you not believe the
divided
cost is
by
a
the
bit
number
too
of prisoners
high?
that we have. What has happened under this government is the prison population, they've had one goal, to lower the prison population by 30%. We have plenty of space in our prisons, and so essentially the costs associated with our prisons, it doesn't cost us an extra $150,000 when we put an extra prisoner into prison. That's not the reality of the cost. It's an accounting treatment of how you deal with it rather than an economic cost of a prisoner. What we're saying very clearly is, look, this government's had only one goal, and it's to lower the prison population by 30%. And it has been soft on crime, and as a result, the message to offenders is that you can get away with stuff. And rather than going to prison, you're going to go on home detention. Rather than getting a juvenile youth facility, you'll end up with what we call a family group conference. So the reality is the government has sent a message that they don't want prisoners in prison, and as a result, actually, the sentencing has become much lighter, and more importantly, offenders feel they can get away with it. We're going to stop that, because the reality is all of us and all of your viewers would feel good about lowering the number of people in prison if we had a lower amount of crime. But the reverse is the case. Violent crime's up 33%, retail crime's up 100%. We have 9 gang members now for every 10 police officers, and we have a ram raid happening every 11 hours in New Zealand. And so this is not the New Zealand we grew up with, and as a result we need to stop it, and we need to say it is unacceptable, because every 6 months then we see more frequency and more violence and more gratuitous violence. And so that's what we've got to stop, and that's why we say we are going to back the police, we're going to tackle the gangs big time, we're going to make sure there's serious consequences for serious young offenders, and importantly we're going to have stronger sentencing as well.
When you talk about stronger sentencing, that means locking people up longer. Have you worked out how many prisons we have to build?
Well,
and what is the cost behind it?
Because the government has emptied our prisons by 24%, we have plenty of capacity for prisons at this point in time. The issue that we have is we need to limit the amount of discounts that judges can apply when they are giving sentences. So that's what we're going to focus on.
Do you actually believe the boot scheme will work for the youth offenders?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
Can you explain further?
Yeah, so what we're saying is, look, for serious repeat young offenders, age 15 to 17, we're going to create an option for judges to use our military academies. Our military leaders are some of our best leaders and our best mentors. And if I think about the Oranga Tamariki staff that I saw on TV 4 or 5 weeks ago, the reality is they're not great leaders or great mentors for those very vulnerable young people. So we want those young people in there with those military leaders, but importantly, we also want the community organisations in there that can help them with numeracy or literacy or addiction or trauma or whatever their issues are. What we're saying is we're going to make a powerful, targeted intervention in those young people's lives because we want to change the trajectory of where they're going. And we care about them, but we need them to understand consequences and discipline and personal accountability. So that's why that is there. And we've based it off of a very successful set of programs that we've seen here in New Zealand called the Limited Service Volunteer Program, and taken some of those same principles into this development.
Have some Chinese tea.
Thank you.
And talking about the youth offenders, do you actually agree that parents or guardians of the minor offenders should also be held legally responsible to some extent? And if you agreed, what would you consider making law changes?
Well, I think the bigger issue is to change the trajectory of that young person's life, because they haven't chosen necessarily the family, the community, the neighbourhood that they're in. And you have to acknowledge that they're coming from some pretty tough and difficult circumstances. And that's why I say, on the one hand, we're going to be really tough on crime, but on the other hand, we're also going to be really working hard on the causes of crime as well. And that means that actually we need to identify those families and those young people that are having interaction with the criminal justice system, having health issues or education issues or housing issues. And actually we know we're going to spend a lot of money with them over the next 20 years. So why don't we take some of that now and spend it forward and actually try and change the trajectory of where that family's going, where that individual's going. We call that social investment. It was started by a guy called Sir Bill English, who was a former Prime Minister of New Zealand, and we want to move that from theory into action and make sure we're doing that work, which is hard, long-term work, often with community organisations, often with social workers, making sure we change the pattern of behaviour that's in that young person.
When you see a young chap at the age of 11 or 12 in the middle of the night, wandering along the streets, do you not believe his or her parents should actually take some responsibility for that?
Absolutely they should. I mean, it's their children. They should be responsible for them. Absolutely.
And how can we make them learn that they have the responsibility?
Well, that's the thing is we have to change that individual, that young individual who's actually on that wrong pathway or in that environment that's going to put them on the wrong pathway. And that's the chance that we've got. And by making these interventions around that young person, that then changes the trajectory of where their life goes and hopefully their kids and their grandkids as well.
According to the latest figure currently, it looks like there are more patch gang members than our frontline police. So do you think we will have, in the future, under the national-led government, will have sufficient police force to clamp down those gang members and their activities?
Well, we've seen a 70% growth in gang numbers under this government, and I want to be really clear, gang members are not nice people. They want all the rights of being a New Zealander, but they're not prepared to take the responsibilities. And so what we need to do is make sure that we are tough on gangs and we tackle gangs strongly. You're right, there is now 9 gang members for every 10 police officers, and and the gangs are recruiting much quicker. So the point is we need to be tough on gangs members, and that means, one, we don't let them wear gang patches in public places. We give police the powers to break them up and disperse them when they're actually in public places intimidating in big groups. We make sure they can't plan criminal activity to get them. We ensure we have warrantless search powers for what we call firearm prohibition orders that are issued against gang members that have committed serious offending and been convicted of such. And we also say that if you're before the judge, actually if you're a gang member, it's an aggravating factor in your sentencing. And that way we're sending the message really clearly that gangs just don't get away with stuff. Because at the moment, when you think about what happened in Opotiki in New Zealand, where the gangs came to town, a school got shut for a week. People couldn't use the bus service and they didn't feel safe in their own home. That is utterly unacceptable.
Well, Chris, this is something that I don't understand at all. Yeah, I was brought up in Singapore. And if you were in Singapore, basically, gangs are not allowed. The organizations are not allowed. Not to even mention about their headquarters there and headquarters there. And I believe the Chinese community don't understand either why this country will allow gangs to be there.
Well, gangs have been a long-term feature of life in New Zealand for a long period of time.
It's time
what
to
we're
change,
saying
isn't
to
it?
you, it is time to change. That's why I was saying we're going to tackle the gangs and be really tough on gangs. Because we want to send a message really clearly to a young person: do not join a gang because your life is going to be difficult.
I mean, why can't we simply just ban them?
Well,
Totally.
you've actually got to do the practical work to make sure that it's an unattractive option for young people. It's so important, and that's why we're saying, we've got to be really tough on gangs. We don't tolerate the fact that they can now have gang warfare in the middle of a street in Palmerston North, and regular New Zealanders going about their daily business with their kids are actually having to shelter in a coffee shop. That's got to stop. The real rise in violent crime is often due to actually gang membership and also illegal guns that gang members have as well. It's causing, we've seen even in the last few weeks 3 or 4 shootings that have taken place between gang members as well. So you can try and ban stuff, but in a liberal democracy like New Zealand, you just don't get to ban things. You actually have to make the case to say this is an unattractive lifestyle.
But we did ban something. We can actually do it if we want to.
Well, what I'm saying to you is we are going to do it. We are going to tackle
Okay.
the gangs, and we're going to be really tough on gangs. But there is a complex set of reasons that are driving people into a life of crime. We've got to work long term on those issues. But we also have to send a message really clearly to New Zealanders that this is unacceptable. We live in a world of rights and responsibilities. We are going to tackle gangs and be tough on them.
Let's take a break. When we come back, I'll have more questions for Christopher Luxon. Welcome back. Welcome back, Chris. Now, relationship between New Zealand and China. What is your view, the future relationship between the two countries like?
Well, look, I mean, it's been an important relationship. It's been one that's been developed over 50 years. It's one that has led to huge trade opportunities for both countries. We now have $40 billion worth of two-way trade. China is our number one trading partner in the world. But it's also been a relationship that's been built up over time, and it's been built up on the basis of mutual respect for each other as well. And so there are areas of huge cooperation between the two countries, but there are also areas of difference. And what's important is that in any relationship, you raise those issues consistently, and that's what successive New Zealand governments have been doing. Where we have differences that we want to raise with each other, we do that. But we always do it with mutual respect, and we do it consistently. New Zealand will always have an independent foreign policy. We believe in the rule of law. We stand up for some values around liberal democracies that we think are really important to us, and we'll continue to work with like-minded partners around the world to protect those values. But as I said, in the case of China, we have a long-standing relationship built on mutual respect. We have huge areas of common interest, and we also have areas of difference, and in good relationships, you should be able to raise those.
Do you think China is posting as threats within this Pacific region?
Well, what we want to see within the Pacific region is peace and harmony and stability, and what we don't want to see is an escalation of tensions within the region, and that's important and incumbent on everybody. So, the Pacific is the country, is the region that we feel really attached to and part of in New Zealand. We have deep relationships and partnerships with the Pacific Island countries as well, and we'll continue to do so. So it's all in all of our collective interest to make sure that there's
But Chris,
peace
you
and
have not answered my questions. Do you think that China is posting a threat?
There's definitely been more competitive tensions within the Pacific, and that's something that we want to see de-escalation of.
Do you support one China policy?
Yes, that's the New Zealand's position. We do support one China policy. Yeah.
I remember you say that you would not visit Taiwan as Prime Minister of New Zealand. Do you still stand by that comment?
Yes, in respect of our one China policy. Yes.
Okay. However, your potential coalition partner, David Seymour, just 2 days ago when he was here, he actually confirmed he would visit Taiwan if he received an official invitation as the Deputy Prime Minister. Could be. So what is your view on that? How are you going to stop him? I mean, if one day the National Party and the APP Party working together to form a coalition government.
Yeah, again,
what are you going to do?
You're really good on the hypotheticals. What I'd just say to you though is that
that's what.
I'm being really serious about it too. Is
Yeah.
that I'm trying to be mature about it. We have a very strong relationship with China that's built on mutual respect over many years.
Yeah.
Since 1972, the New Zealand position has
But
been
what
about a
happened
one
if
China policy.
David
We
Seymour
respect
say
that.
that, okay, I'm going to Taiwan?
Hypothetical, not going to answer it.
But this is exactly what he actually confirmed 2 days ago with us. Yes, he said he will. So
Well,
why not?
that's his free will and choice
Okay.
to do what he's talking as David Seymour. I'm not David Seymour. I'm Chris Luxon,
So-
the leader of the National Party.
Of course, yeah. So forming a coalition government, let's say, okay, is your party ready to work with that?
Look, we have worked with ACT in the past, and it's been a strong and stable government.
But there was very different at the time. At the APP Party was only 1 seat in the parliament, and now we were talking about maybe 15.
in earlier times, there's been
Yes.
a lot more seats than that. But what I'd say to you is very clearly is that there's only one guaranteed thing to do if you were listening to this program, and that is if you want to change the government, you the only thing to do is to party vote national. Because that is what changes the government. That is actually what changes and gives us a strong, stable government on the other side to actually get the country turned around to deal with the challenges that we've got. And that's what I'm saying. If you want to get Nancy Liu elected to Parliament, for example, there's only one thing to do. You have to party vote national, because that's the only way that she gets into Parliament is the strong party vote.
But we also understand after the 14th of October, maybe there will be some negotiations between your party and the APP Party. So my question is, what are your bottom lines, and will you make any concessions to the APP for
Well,
forming
no
coalition
respect, but I'm not doing negotiations through the media. It's really important New Zealanders understand if they want a government that's going to manage this economy strongly and well, so that we have the infrastructure and the public services and the law and order that we want to have. That's how we do it. We have to get the economy working, so we've got the cash to be able to make those investments that we need to make. There's only one thing to do, and that is to actually, the choice is really stark, isn't it? I mean, you either get the coalition of chaos of Labour, the Greens and Te Pāti Māori, and a coalition that will be very unstable, or you get strong national-led government from October the 14th.
What about New Zealand First? You have not ruled out working with Winston Peters, but David Seymour, he's in now. Do you believe New Zealand First will return to the Parliament?
Well, they're not in Parliament, but
Yeah.
the bottom line for me is that, I'm here to maximise the National Party vote. There is no strategic voting. There is no way that you help us. There is nothing else that you can do by voting for another party, thinking you're trying to help us in the National Party. There is only one thing to do, and it is to party vote national. It's as simple as that, because that's what changes and gives you a guarantee that you're going to change the government. There's lots of other minor small parties around, but actually the only thing that changes is if you get to change the Labour Party out of government, is you've got to be able to vote for the National Party. And that's my request, because I think people don't sometimes understand MMP as a system, and they risk actually not changing the government if they think they're trying to help by doing some so-called strategic voting. It's as simple as that. It's not complicated. It's just party vote national.
So you can't give me any answer if it really happens that New Zealand First return to the Parliament. What will you do? Can you?
Again, hypothetical, and I'm not going to get into coalition agreements because
Okay.
I am here as the leader of the National Party. I think the National Party has the answers to take New Zealand forward. I think we are the party that can actually fix the economy. I think we are the party that will restore law and order. I think we are the party that will deliver better health and education. And so that's what I believe, and I think I would encourage everyone in New Zealand to vote for the National Party. Whatever the public of New Zealand choose with their votes, then I have to deal with on the other side. But what I'm saying to them on this side of the equation is that there's only one thing to do, which is to party vote national.
Talking about choices, you see, Chris, this is a question I'd like to ask you for a long time. Since you've been the leader of National Party, I've been monitoring you. You've been hardworking, really extremely hardworking. However, how come your personal support is still somewhere wandering around 30% mark?
Well, look, I think
For the
today
opposition.
you've seen a poll come out where Chris Hipkins and I are both equal in terms of preferred Prime Minister. For a leader of the opposition to be in the same position as a Prime Minister, you know, that's a phenomenal achievement when you think about where our party has come from over the last 18 months. That's a fantastic result. So, but the story is it's not just about me. It's actually about who's got the team, who's got the leadership, who's got the energy, who's got the ideas, who's got the experience to actually lead this country through some difficult times to get to the other side where we can realise all the potential that we have, that we're maximising the opportunities, that we're solving our problems, that we're getting things done. And that's my whole backstory. You know, I've come to politics outside of politics. I'm not a career politician who's been doing it for 20 years. I'm someone who's actually come with real world experience. And, you know, I've led a lot of large organisations. I know how to get the best out of a team and people around me that can actually be really great in their jobs. And that's what I think New Zealand needs right now. Someone who understands the economy, can fix it, get it sorted, and get New Zealand moving forward.
Some quick yes or no question for you, Chris. Number one, parliamentary term change to 4 years. Yes or no?
Personally, I'd like it to be 4 years, but there is quite a lot of considerations before we could.
Like what?
You've got to think about some of the checks and balances that we have in our system, but personally I'm an advocate for 4 years.
Okay. Lower the threshold for party votes to 3.5%?
No, don't see any need to change it at all.
The final one, interesting. Lower voting age to 16?
No, not at all.
Why?
No. Look, I think at some point you have to draw a line, and there's, you know, every country wrestles with it. Some choose 20, some choose 18. I know there's a campaign for 16.
Yeah.
I think on balance it's about right at 18.
Thank you for joining us. I wish you luck and your
Thank you.
party on the election night.
Yeah, well, thank you. We have a great country, but we now have to get it sorted. We have to get it turned around, and we have to get it back on track.
Come on, have some Chinese tea.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming.
Good to see
Thank
you.
you. Good to see you
Thanks so
too.
much.
Yeah, thank you.